This is one of the series of Hassenfeld presentations about community engagement projects, and this one is about multi-semester projects and how to handle those. And I have with me my able assistant, Brianna Hardy, because she was engaged in one of these projects through the entire year last year, and she is a double major in graphic design and PR with a minor in marketing and orientation aid and resident assistant and everything else under the sun. So she's a great person to know. So what we're going to talk about is sort of the good, the bad, and I decided I can't say the ugly, so the beautiful about these kinds of projects. And even though we say they're multi-semester, they also are multidisciplinary, because these could not happen. The world doesn't work in academic silos, and so these projects are multidisciplinary. I'm not sure that's unique to the multi-semester ones, but I think the multi-semester ones become more interdisciplinary than the others. They're also multi-student, because obviously there are students from semester A and semester B, and in some cases semester C, but at the same time you need a variety of student expertise. And so just so that multidisciplinary, multi-student really sort of interchanges very nicely among itself. And then multi-course, obviously. So what I thought I would do is talk to you a little bit about the 5 projects that I've been involved with and use each one of those as a way to sort of extract some lessons for what worked, what didn't work, what might do differently, as a way of talking about this. So as I said, I've done 5 projects. The first one was back in 2012-13 with the East Bay Coalition for the Homeless. That spanned 1 academic year, and the reason for the plus afterwards is that that's a project that, or a relationship that has continued. And part of my reason for talking about that too is that I hear from my colleagues in other parts of the university that some of what we do in Gabelli is very transaction oriented, and we aren't really crafting and building relationships, but we really are. And so I really wanted to make that point as well. The second one was with River's Edge, and this is the one that was semester A, B, and C, and it also continues to this day, that relationship and the sort of connection between RWU and the community partner. Then there was a project with Stepping Stone Incorporated in Fall River, and so far in each one of these, Al Cutting's also been involved, so somewhere he needs kudos for that. Then we did a project for the Parks and Recreation Department at South Kingstown Road here in Rhode Island, and that was the project that Bree was involved with from start to finish. And then this semester we're working on a project, both last semester and this semester, with the Nature Conservancy and their shell recycling project. So that's where we're headed. All right, so the first one was the East Bay Coalition for the Homeless. And this was the first project that I did coming back from sabbatical. It was the 2nd year for the CPC. And fortunately, Arnold was there to help walk me through part of the process. I had worked with community partners before in other classes, especially the ad campaigns class, because it just works better for students to have something real to do. But it was really nice, since this seemed more official, to have someone to walk me through the process. East Bay Coalition said, we would like you to do 2 surveys. We would like to rebrand. We would like new identification. We would like new promotional material. And I'm sort of sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, we can't do this in 1 semester in a marketing research class. But with Arnold there, he was able to move that discussion and give me the confidence to be able to say, okay, let's talk about what we can do this semester. Does that work for you? And what could we maybe then do the next semester? So the first semester we did a survey for the Board of Trustees, fielded the survey, analyzed the data, presented it to the Board of Trustees, and then started a community survey. That then transferred the 2nd semester to another group of students that finalized the community survey. We fielded the community survey, we analyzed the data, and that's when we then connected with Al and his Web Development Center class, which is CIS 229, 399, 499. And at that point, the students who'd been working on the community survey came into the Web Development Center class and presented the data and said, okay, here's what we know about what people do and don't know about the client, East Bay Coalition for the Homeless. Here's what they think about the other not-for-profit organizations in Rhode Island that serve a similar community. And here's what our research says about just not-for-profit funding, and why do people give and make donations in the first place. So that gave both classes this base of knowledge. And then, using Al's model, we took the students and put them into 5 groups. And so each group had a marketing person, a graphic design person, a web development person, so that they were multidisciplinary groups, and they competed for the client's business. And Diane Smith from East Bay Coalition for the Homeless was just the most wonderful client ever. And as a result of that, then because we had those 2 classes working in concert that second semester, we were able to give them what they wanted. That new brand identity, some marketing pieces, completely rebuilt their website. And if you were to go to their website today, you would see the website the students built. If you get any communication from them, it's the logo, it's the tagline, it's the stationery we did for them. Their Facebook page is a Facebook page we built for them. Just all of that. It's all still there, and our students can still point to that. So then the sort of follow-on pieces, this is the plus, is that Susan Schenk, who is the CEO or the COO for East Bay Community Action Program, has called almost every year, and sometimes 2 semesters each semester, and said, hey, can you send us an intern? We need an intern, sometimes they need 2. And I realize they're probably supposed to go through career services, but there's just been this relationship that's developed, and they take our students, and it's just really been wonderful. So the takeaways from this is that it's better to be lucky than to be good. So I had Arnold on my side. We had Diane Smith, who was just a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful client. It was good to be able to start small. The takeaway here is, when faced with a really big project, is ask and say, here's what we can do, because I think a lot of this is a negotiation process, and it's helping the client also to do a better job of articulating what it is that they want. And so if you can say, all right, to get to where you want, we need to start here and do this, and then we can do this, and then we can do this, then so far, knock on wood, every one of them has said yes. So building that relationship. And then the other part of this, as Al and I have said, even in some things that we've written, is give the students their heads. They will think of things to do that would never have occurred to us. It's sort of give them the material they need, give them the playground, set it out for them, and then let them go. There's just no better way to do it than that. Okay, so then there was River's Edge Arts. River's Edge is an organization based in Woonsocket that works with students who are at risk of dropping out of high school. And their medium, as it were, for working with the students is art. So it might be photography, it might be film, it might be graphic design, it might be, they've got a t-shirt printing studio. They also work as a social enterprise, because those students can't come to River's Edge and then not have a job. So they pay the students $10 an hour. But the exchange is the students have real responsibilities, and they work with real clients at the same time. So River's Edge said, we've been doing surveys of our students because our grant funders have said, we need you to provide evidence for that you are actually accomplishing something. So they developed these, or they had surveys that they were giving the students, and they said, but we don't know what to do with the data. So great marketing research class, we got real data to play with. Well, it took us half of the semester to clean the data. It was just a real mess. And from the student perspective, I think they got really frustrated with the cleaning the data process. It's a little bit like technical editing. It's not real exciting. But they now all understand why you've got to ask the right questions, deliver the survey in the right way, so you get data you can use to get the answers you want. So anyway, at the end of that first semester, we were ready to present the results to the client. And our real problem was, their survey was crap. And the results were not anything that we felt like they could base strategies on. So we're thinking about, that's the other part of this. The students now have to think about, how do we deliver this message? Fortunately, about 15 minutes into the presentation, the client says, my survey really sucks, doesn't it? So that final presentation really became then this wonderful discussion of where the issues were, what needed to be done, and the side story that I'll tell you is that the survey they were using was developed by graduate students in social psych at Brown. And one of the problems was, that they were validated scales that made sense to graduate students. They hardly made sense to college students, let alone the high school students who are using it. So the discussion with the clients, she said, this survey needs to be in the students' language. It needs to be something that makes sense to the students. So what we did the next semester, I sort of call it Voice of the Student. We had 2 groups of students in the qualitative marketing research class. One group every week went up and spent like 2 or 3 hours with the students at River's Edge, listening to them talk about, here's what I'm doing, here's why I'm doing it, here's how my home life is different because I've been in River's Edge, you know, yada, yada, yada. So they heard in the students' own language what the students were getting out of it. Another group of students was working with ELO, which is headquartered at the high school in Woonsocket, and each of those students writes a reflection piece. So we used In Vivo, which is a software that helps you analyze qualitative data, and they went through and analyzed those. So the end of that semester then, the students really had a good idea, our students had a good idea of what the River's Edge and the ELO students said about here's what I'm learning. Now we had that information. Over the summer, the director and assistant director and I sort of talked about that so that then come the fall, we're back to the marketing research class and those students were able to develop a survey that made sense. The relationship piece of this is that we needed to pilot test the survey and various versions of it. So one afternoon, a whole slew of the kids from River's Edge came down to Roger Williams. We did a whole sort of admissions type tour of campus, showed them around campus. Then they came to pilot test the survey, but that made them the experts. They were telling us what they liked and what they didn't like. And because one of their studios is a graphic design studio, they were saying, where'd you get this graphic? Yeah, I could do something better than that. So they were able then, they made contributions to the survey. But at the end of that, then we have a survey that they are still using to this day. And that gives them data that they can use as they are talking to grant organizations. But it didn't stop there because the next semester, then River's Edge showed up in Al's class and they did redesign the website for River's Edge.
Using the information that had come out of your research.
Yeah. So again, how do we want to talk on this website? What's the language to be used on this website? What do the images need to convey? We now knew that because we had the voice of the student, the discourse community, as it were.
Websites that have been developed in the web development.
Yeah.
And it's because of that collaboration that really made it possible.
Yeah, that collaboration is everything. It really, and as when Al and I used to team teach a class, we would put this line at the end of the syllabus, if you enjoy this class, we will too. And I think that's really true. The connections with students continued because the students at Woonsocket High School involved in a learning opportunity need to find an industry mentor. And so there were a couple of students that wanted to engage in some survey research of their own that came out of the pilot test group. So we matched them up with a couple of RWU students to be their mentors for research. And then the group that's been doing the analysis, Farbode's group, also adopted one of those students for a year. And so she came down and worked with those students. So that was a really nice extra one. Because we built this relationship, last January, Karen called and said, I'm working with the people from the Education Department of Rhode Island, especially for Woonsocket. We need to develop some sort of cultural competency survey for our teachers. And I said, great, but I don't know. But meanwhile, pulled in Sue Bosco and Carrie Yolucci, and they know about that sort of thing. And so we had several conversations. Unfortunately, part of the conversations were, so what are you going to do with this? What are the responses the teachers give? What are the impacts on them? And there was a lot of things they needed to work out. So that didn't go any further, but Carrie said that she was going to try to keep talking to people there. So we pull in the RWU resources. And then last fall, Karen calls again, and she said, we've had a lot of staff changes. We need help with our staff brochures and our user manuals, HR manuals. And I said, again, that's not me, but Sue Bosco knows organizational behavior. And so Sue Bosco had a small class this semester that redid all their policy manuals for them and just made the presentation last week. The last thing is, I got an email 2 days ago saying, I've got staff turnover, can you come up and let's talk about these surveys again and how to telling people what to do with the data. So in 2 weeks, I'm going back up there and we're doing that again. So a lot of these connections happen just very informally. And so I think the takeaway from this one, the multi-semester, we took that calculated risk from the start to be willing to say, the survey really isn't doing what we think you want it to do. And because the client agreed, that's why it morphed into this. At that point, the marketing research classes were 20 to 22 instead of the 32 to 36. And I was able to, that smaller class sort of maybe counterintuitively can do more than working with a big class. But again, that relationship is just paramount. And giving people room to say what they need, say what they want. Okay, now we do another marketing CIS web development collaboration with Stepping Stone. And this is one where Stepping Stone, which is an organization in Fall River, they also have outposts in New Bedford, and they work with people who have various addiction problems, but they also were developing a sort of overnight homeless shelter first step in, and that's what we worked with them for. They said, we want help with our PR efforts. This group of students that were working with this, we only had one person that really knew anything about PR, and she was a sophomore. So what we ended up doing for them was, in the process of talking to them, they were using their Facebook page as just a way to get job descriptions out. So the students totally redid their Facebook page, and if you look at their Facebook page today, that's the one that they did. We did a donor brochure for them because the director said, I don't have anything I can use when I go talk to donors. They said we need to get the word out a little bit more. And so the students, again, this is for give the students their heads and they'll do it. The students found that one of the local sort of public access stations was giving away free TV PSAs. So she wrote and went and shot a say for TV, and she wrote and then did the voiceover for 2 radio PSAs. So the students the nice thing is they take ownership of this. And you're finding that, I'm sure, that this is because they get invested with the client. And then this client waited a whole year for their website development. And if you go look at their website today, it's the website that the class developed. And so the takeaways from this one were to be flexible, because while the client said they wanted PR, we weren't really able to deliver it once we got going, so we morphed into other deliverables that were useful to the client. Don't throw anything away, because Al's class needs the data when they get ready to do it. Enlist colleagues. And the PR student was able to go talk with Hume Johnson. And Hume was very, very helpful for that student, because she was just this young sophomore who didn't know much. And again, client relationships and student relationships, because those students had to be able to come back and provide some information for Al's class. So, and that logo actually is the one that your class redesigned. Yes. Because the one that our students designed, we never saw the.
It had a bad word in it.
Yes. For South Kingstown, again, 2 classes: the marketing research class, and then it was a 429, which in business we've created a CPC designation for a class. And so we developed a survey, tested it, got ready to field it. In the second semester, a small group of students, of which Bree was part, then actually fielded the survey. Well, we helped them think about what the social media aspects are to actually get the word out about the survey. We fielded the survey, analyzed it, and the report's the first one that's there. And this one, again, the class of 32 to 36 to start out with, but then we had this nice hand-picked group of students at the end. So I thought it might be useful for people to hear a student perspective.
So just in general, being a part of the first semester class, it was a group of 36. So what we did is we divided into small groups. And from there, that's how we really formulated our survey, how we're gonna talk to these individuals, because you're giving this survey from people from 18 to 60 plus. So you have to be careful with language, what you're using, how you're actually talking to them. So we did a lot of how we formulate messages, what Likert scales to use, how to use them, so in order to get the exact results that we needed. So after we got those results, we took them, we presented them to the client and said, okay, here is what we found. But at that point, we still have no idea what they exactly want from us from that data. So then come over to the next semester, I was pulled into that class. We were all different majors, from management, design, public relations, and marketing, all put together in this one class to be able to then sit there and analyze the data. So to figure out how to disseminate the message, that's kind of where I came in with my public relations background, is I came in and said, okay, we need to use different Facebook, we need to do in-mail and send them out to people's houses, and we also need to sit there and have them like right when you walk in, so we're hitting the right target audience. From then, what we also did too is we made sure on each of those surveys that they had specific links. So when people went to them, we knew exactly where they were coming from. So if someone picked up something from Facebook and clicked on the link and took the survey via Facebook, now we know that that's how they communicate with their target audience. So we've got a lot of information that way and gathered that data. So then we sat there and said, okay, here's what we do. We took everything, we really said, okay, this is what the priority of the town wants. They kept on what their budget and what they needed to themselves, but we said this is what you could possibly do, this is what is in demand from the town, and this is what people are looking to see improvement on. So we then presented it through infographics and a presentation, step by step, came up with our whole plan with the CPC a lot of pages later. What was really nice of this is we started how I came in and worked through the whole semester. This is my third CPC project. I was a part of 2 other graphic design ones, so I was able to sit there and I did work from the fall, and I never feel like that I didn't leave it, because I'm not that type of person to be like, oh, here, because it was not done first semester, and it definitely needed that extra push last semester. I even worked on some of it in the winter too, during my spare time, to sit there to be able to get this out, because I didn't want to drop a client. Like, that's my responsibility. So I was able to work on that through the whole semester. I felt like I had the time to do so, and to be able to work in a bigger group and then bring it in smaller to focus on the core, not of what actually needs to get done, really helped me and the whole team through that whole process. Do you guys have any questions? Okay.
This was a great group. We would be texting each other at like 2 and 3 in the morning.
1 in the morning.
Getting toward the end. We had a Google Doc that we were all working on. It just was.
That was fun.
It was a wonderful group. And at the commencement ball, you guys sent me a picture. So neat.
I think that's one of the most wonderful things about these projects, is these projects energize students. I know we've talked about this before, and we both find that students do way more in a CPC class than we would ever dream of assigning. And it's the competitive nature, it's the desire to please the client. And you get to teach things that are just impossible to teach in a standard class. And so these projects are just wonderful. And I think this multi-semester part builds on that to show you don't just work with the client once. Your goal is to develop a relationship with the client, because sales is expensive when you're in a consulting environment. What we pay to bring in students, right, is a lot. And if we can get that client relationship going with a high school or whatever, or a community project, then that sales cost goes away. It's basically just absorbed. Or it's not absorbed anyway, it just goes away, And I think this is terrific.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that endorsement. Your check will be in the mail.
Real work experience too, like you can put this on your portfolio, on your resume, because you've actually done this real work, and you can point to, the culmination of all that work and say, I was part of that, and I can explain the whole project to you, and I can tell you all the challenges and all the benefits, and all of the pitfalls of dealing in a large group with communities, and dealing with all different groups within the student groups, and you learn so many different skills, I think, as just being part of that.
Yeah, most definitely. I feel what I love about CPCs, I started them my sophomore year, and I did some design with Professor Farmer. I did 2 with him, and then Professor Micken was like, "Go ahead, can you come and do this?" I was like, "Yeah, okay." I have experience that I get the most out of it, because then now when I sit there and I go into interviews, or when I sit there and actually to talk about my portfolio work, whatever it may be, from design to PR to marketing, I know how to sit there and talk about it because I lived it.
Right.
So I can sit there and tell you, oh, this is what it's like in my experiences of working with a client, how to communicate messages, instead of being like, this one time in class I did this.
Right.
So I've taken many.
It's real.
Yes,
Yeah.
real life.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me ask you a question. Students tell me that when they go to an interview, the moment they mention their CPC project, they own that interview. That's all the interviewer wants to talk about. All those tricky questions that they were going to ask you are down the drain because you've got something real to talk about. And so students are figuring out ways to introduce their CPC projects. You know, what was your favorite class? Boom, you got it, right? Have you ever worked with a real client? That's one that they really love, right? In terms of saying, yeah, I've worked with 9 clients. I won some, I lost some. What would you like to know? You know, kind of. And that's the end of those tricky interview questions. You own it. Have you found that, or?
Yeah, I've used a bunch of my experiences at this university all into my projects, but some of the companies I've interviewed with FM Global, the position where I'm at right now at Gray Matter Marketing, their favorite project of mine is the rebranding of rebranding of Central Falls, Rhode Island. And when I was a sophomore, I was project manager of a design team of 4 senior boys. So I had that whole responsibility sitting there, how time management skills, how to communicate visually, and how did I communicate with people who are older than me. And so I always bring that project up, and it's a very easy talking point to be able to sit there and say, this is what I did.
They just eat it up. Yeah.
Or do you still have my internship?
So I think the takeaways from this one were the diversity of student experiences that were needed to make the project work. Also, if you're going to do something like this, use CPC resources. That class of 36 students, the client was in South Kingstown. The current rules at that point, and I don't know if they've changed, don't allow students to drive their own cars. So how do we get that many people down there? Arnold would just hire us a huge Bluebird bus and a driver, and we would take that bus down and back, and we had to do that twice. The other thing is that when something takes this long, as a faculty member, you may be the point person for the client. If it's more constrained to one class, then the students can have that role of liaison. But when you're going over 2 or 3 semesters, you, as a faculty member, take on more of that point person role, and you need to leave time for that, and it takes up resources. There's a lot of psychic income to get out of that. And then again, the relationships with the clients, with the students, and again, my soapbox is smaller classes would be better. And finally, this semester, the same thing, marketing research, and then the CPC marketing class, we're working with the town of Bristol to think about what they might do to make the downtown more attractive, bring more shoppers to downtown Bristol. And so this is very similar to South Kingstown. The first semester of the marketing research class developed the survey, did the pilot testing. It was a little bit easier. We didn't have to go to South Kingstown. We just went downtown here. And then the second semester is again a sort of a hand-picked group of students, but it's students who are creative writing majors, it's students who are graphic design majors and marketing majors, because we need all of that talent to make this work. And I've put some of the other CPC projects that we have with the town of Bristol on here because I think part of what goes on too, we have a client that we go back to over and over again, is almost this responsibility to the client, to the university, to the process. And one of the things that's not on the slide anywhere, but I think it would be useful if we knew more about who was doing what. Because Brian and I were just talking, we're both doing a project this semester with the Nature Conservancy. But if we hadn't had this conversation, we'd never know. So I think it'd be nice if we could find a way, even if that was a list somewhere that we could see. But I really felt a responsibility coming in here, given that the city got an almost $1 million grant for the Maritime Center from an earlier project. And we've got a lot to live up to with this project. And the takeaways from this one, again, ask for what you can do. The client said, we want this big market analysis of downtown. And I said, well, a lot of that's econ. We're really marketing, but here's what we can do to provide you a good piece of that. We can't really do all of that in one semester, but we can do it in 2. And they said that was fine. The resources come from unexpected places. While our partner was the town of Bristol and the people that work in the community development section, the woman who is president of the Bristol Merchants Association has been an equal partner in this process, and she has been wonderful to work with. So for example, the night that we were supposed to do the pilot test with residents of Bristol, we were supposed to go to one building and they said, oh, sorry, somebody else, the town council's doing something there, so we're going to move you to another building. Half an hour later, another email. Oh, the heat just went out in that building. It's going to be too cold. Then the woman who's president of the Bristol Merchants Association gets on the phone and starts talking to people, and we ended up at the Lobster Pot in their sort of private room. But the CPC orders pizzas for off-campus events. So the pizza delivery guy shows up at the Lobster Pot with these huge stack of pizzas, this big bag of drinks. And the manager from the Lobster Pot says, tell him just bring it in. Well, the only way to that room is right through the middle of the main dining room of the Lobster Pot. So here the guy from Bristol House of Pizza and I are carrying these stacks of pizza through the dining room with the Lobster Pot into the room for the pilot test. So again, resources come from where you don't always expect them, but I think part of that is because we get invested in the project and they get invested in the project, and it just really works. Patience is a virtue, especially over a couple semesters. The people who are in charge of the project, like one person left or quit, went to Providence from the town of Bristol partway through, and so all of a sudden one person was handling everything, and so she couldn't get back to us as quickly, so we had to figure out how do we make this work. There was the RWU relationship that was already there, and I said I felt a real responsibility to keep that up. And then the same things you're seeing here, the diversity of student expertise and the client relationship is really important. So, back to the good, the bad, and the beautiful. The good is I really like the continuation. That's just very satisfying. The fact that you don't just do the project and end, that there is a continuing relationship that is built. And you can leverage the knowledge from one semester to the next. I don't think that's unique because we all leverage what we learn from project A to project B to project C. Even if it's different clients, we learn what we did well and didn't do so well. But the continuity of knowledge, even when it's across from a marketing to a web development class. The other really good is student buy-in. And again, that's not unique to multi-semester, but for the students who do both semesters, it's really amazing for them. Deeper engagement, and it mimics the real world. You don't generally just do one part and then say, okay, I'm done now, bye. The people you're working with, they come back. There are consequences for your action. The bad is that continuation is not always feasible. Unfortunately, sometimes it just doesn't work out. And clients change over time. Either their budgets change, personnel changes, the tasks change, goals change. And so you have to sort of be willing to go with the flow and be flexible and think about how does this work? And I think that's in some ways the hardest thing for students, because the semester starts and you think about it, you give the student a syllabus and you say, here's what's going to happen each week. Well, with these projects, here's what's going to happen each week. You can't determine that. And even if you think you could, you can't, because all these things change. And when it happens over 2 or 3 semesters, they change even more. But again, I think the rewards make it worthwhile. And you're attempting to foretell the future, which we can't do. But we're trying to say, here's what I think I can do down the road. And again, I've been very fortunate that someone in the dean's office has said, yeah, we'll let you do this because the 429 classes are an overload for me. And they're in addition to the budget for the dean to be able to pay me for those 4 or 5 or 6 students and to pay Sue Bosco for hers for this semester. And so that takes a willingness that has not always been there. And so sometimes I feel like I'm saying to the client, yep, we'll do this next semester, not knowing for sure that we can, but just sort of hoping against hope that we will. So again, that support is really important. But the beautiful is that the clients come back, the relationships are there, the associations are there. And this is what RWU says to the world, this is what we're doing. And so for like River's Edge, when the person who's now the director of River's Edge, who used to be the associate director, she can pick up the phone and call and say, I need help with PR manuals, I need help with the survey, I need help with this. And so Roger Williams provides that point of contact, that point of connection of providing assistance when it's needed. And our students also learn that. The other thing that I love about these for business students especially is that business students don't always connect with not-for-profit organizations and municipalities. And they start taking on that other perspective. And I think that's really, really important for people to see the other side of that. My last message is under-promise and over-deliver. That's sort of like, yeah, I think we can make that happen, but we'll try our very best. And then the students always give their very best. But anyway, so thus endeth the lesson. Thank you for coming. There are copies of the reports for the projects that are finished.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you to Bree for coming.
Yeah.
I think I would have titled this CPC 2.0 because really it's an extension of after you get your CPC projects right, where can you take it from there? And this continuing model, multi-semester, building client relationships is something you've done beautifully that we really haven't been able to do before and that you can't do in a single semester. You can build a relationship with a client, but you don't get to see the fruits of that relationship. So especially with students taking these courses from here to here to here to here, the students get to see the advantages of building this relationship, of never leaving your client unhappy, and as you pointed out on your last slide, under-promise and over-deliver. And so I think this is just taking it to a whole new level. I wonder what level 3 will look like.
Well, I'll do it virtually or something.
Yeah.
Just picking up on that, first of all, thank you. It was great.
Yes.
Another whole dimension to this workshop series that we haven't had. In talking to some of the Hassenfeld fellows, and we were having this conversation last night with the intermediate group, we're thinking about building relationships with partners. One of the really nice things that's happened here is that the relationship is with Roger Williams.
Mm-hmm.
It's not with a single instructor or a single course, because as you pointed out, like the clients, needs are going to change over time, and so it might be as a result of working with you that they now are ready to work with Al, or they may come back in a year and say, well, we really need some help with these HR policies, and that may not be your area of expertise, but you have a colleague for this might be a perfect project. And I think that's the way we need to sort of think about these relationships, that it's not me as the faculty member, my project, my partnership, but it's a relationship between the community partner and the university. So that was beautiful.
Yeah.
That would be a real help to some of the folks who are just getting started with this work. I did have one question. I wanted to, several times you said partner, but for most of the presentation you were purposeful about using client. And I wonder if that's, are you drawing some distinction there? Is it?
Not really. I tend to use client because that's the language of, say, an ad agency or a marketing agency. But I wanted to try to say partner more often because I know that's the focus. And I'm also really sensitive about the criticism that business has gotten that, well, they're just clients, and they aren't. They're truly partners. And so in my mind, I don't make while they're two different words, so to me they connote basically the same thing. I realize that partner is probably richer than client. You're the wordsmith, but in my mind, I don't make a distinction. I don't see a client as a transactional relationship and a partner as a different sort of relationship. But
client relationship is always a partnership.
Yeah, a good one. Yeah.
Even in the real world in business, you're partnering with somebody to achieve a goal, and in this sense, they are giving a bit more than your typical client would be. For example, in the Web Development Center, they have to attend class every Wednesday for at least 5 weeks, and then they have to commit to working with a team for implementation for probably another 5 weeks past that. So they have a more significant role to play, not to mention the fact they don't have a guaranteed product at the end, right? We're very careful not to say, you'll get this wonderful thing, right? We say, you'll get a wonderful experience working with students, and we hope it will result in this wonderful product. But so far, it always has.
Yeah.
And so I like the word client, I like the word partnership, and I think you can use them interchangeably. Yeah.
Well, and I think the partners get really invested in this, and I've been really lucky to have people who have either they're in education like River's Edge, or they've had education in their background somewhere, so they're equally as interested in coming at the end and saying to the students, okay, what did you get out of this? And I've actually had clients, almost partners, almost take over that last discussion and ask the students, what did you get? What did you learn? So when we make our final presentation to the town of Bristol, we were at the Bristol Merchants Association a couple of weeks ago, and they said, we want to come to that last presentation because we've got questions we want to ask the students, and we want them to sort of understand even more deeper what's happening. And so the partner gets invested in this too, which is what I think. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, I mean, I think you just took the words out of my mouth. I mean, I think what's interesting is just, I mean, beyond the sort of what you might consider the conventional client role is that they become sort of teachers and mentors, right? It's somewhat by de facto, right, of the kind of relationship it is, but I do think you're right that, I mean, ideally they want to do that,
Yeah.
right? And they want to teach, but they also sort of want to be there to support the students in some way. So
Yeah.
it is a little bit more intensive in that way than just delivering a product, right, for somebody.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even from my personal experience, I did the Centennial campaign with the Rhode Island Red Cross, and that was a semester-long project with very strict deadlines. Turnover was super quick, so I was kind of worked as like a liaison between the two. And Tempe Thompson, who was the Rhode Island Red Cross chapter, she was in charge of all of this. I still talk to her to this day, even though she moved to the YMCA, and she said, if you need anything, let me know and you can be my contact. Like, I will write you a reference, whatever you need to do that, I can do that for you. So I feel like I not only, yes, she was my client, I did work for her, but now, like, when I move on into real world, she can say, oh, well, I worked with Bri and this is what she was able to execute for me. And so it was kind of, that turned into a good partnership that I have with her.
Well, I guess that's where I was going, because I don't need to sort of pick at the phrase too much or be overly critical, but I mean, it seems to me that the client relationship says, here's a deliverable, and here's how the deadlines we're going to deliver it. But the nature of this work is such that they're, as you said, they're giving more than they're getting in many cases, and the benefit in that relationship really sort of defaults to the students. Right? The students are having this hands-on experience that they couldn't get otherwise, and it's a real benefit to their sort of professional development. Whereas I think I guess I'm not picking so much on the word because in terms of that, I think that what you just described, it seems to me, is much more of a partnership.
Yeah.
Right? It's this sustainable relationship. There's this back and forth. This work led to another sort of relationship, and so there's more investment than this one-time deliverable.
Yeah.
And the fact that they come back is a testament to the value that they're getting, whether it's in the product or the satisfaction they feel in helping students, helping the university. The fact that they keep coming back again and again and again, saying this was a positive experience for us, it's something we want to continue doing, I think that just speaks volumes.
Yeah, and the woman who used to be in charge of River's Edge, Becca Greenwald Speck, said, I want to meet with you and the PR people because I think there's a story here. And I think her story was too early. I think had she done that in the last couple of years, would have been more reception. But she said, we have worked with Brown, we've worked with Bryant, we've worked with all these other schools, and never before have we worked with a school where people have taken on our perspective for our project and done what we needed done as opposed to what they wanted to do. And she said, every interaction we've had with RWU has been of that type. And she said, I think that's worth talking about in some fashion around the state of Rhode Island. And unfortunately, the discussion never went any further than that. But again, I think maybe that was a message that came a little earlier than it needed to. The time wasn't just right. But and I think that says a lot about our students, because I have had other clients say the same thing. Like the church community housing person said, I was really, really leery about doing anything with students. We worked with students before, and it just was not worth our time. But this time, wow, it really was. And the students took on our responsibility as their responsibility. And I think that speaks well for our students.
Yes.
And I don't think we
Yes.
can underestimate the goodwill that we build with these projects with the community. To tag on to your idea about the Roger Williams University being perceived as such a community resource. I was in a store, this was a few years ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago, store in Bristol, and one of the cruise ships had come in. It was the summer, and there were some people on those little river cruise ships that were from another country. And they were talking to the proprietor and saying, this is such a charming town. And she said, oh, you don't know half of it. She said, we have a university here. They are incredible. She said, I wanted to put a little tea room onto the back of my store, and I wasn't sure, if it would work. And she said, they have wonderful students that came in, the architecture students, the business students, marketing students, the engineering students. They all came, and they did all different pieces and gave me some wonderful feedback. And she said, because of them, I'm going to be able to do what I want. And she said, you just can't get that in any other town. So I thought, wow, I just happened to be shopping, just listening to, overhearing this conversation. I thought, wow, that's such a testament to our students and their value to the community, and these projects, the value to building our sense of goodwill, which comes in valuable when we want something from Bristol. We want to work with Bristol on something that we'd like to go further on when we've built that really strong foundation of trust and collaboration. It's really helpful.
You found it. There it is, CBC 3.0,
There it is.
international clients.
Here we are. There we are.
Kathy, I have a question for you. So I have a real intellectual interest in this idea of a few of the points you talked about. This idea of sort of transferring knowledge, right, from one semester to another in terms of what a particular partnership or project entails. And then also this sort of sharing knowledge and sort of motives and goals across courses, right? I mean, so I've done a good bit of research on this and sort of some of the challenges and opportunities that students encounter when they have to figure out ways to come up with shared goals, across time and across sort of different stakeholders, right? And also sort of how to share knowledge in that situation, right? I mean, it's a particular challenge because students are, they're not around very much, right? You do a couple years, right? And you move on to your bigger and better things. And so we're lucky if we get them in a project for a year, right? Let alone beyond that. And so I think one of the challenges for me is like not just to feel like, yes, I could take all that on myself and manage how do I transfer that knowledge to the next student group, and then each student group just has a discrete semester experience of that, and they move on with their lives, right? I'm sort of wondering, like, well, what work do we need to do to make that sort of work more a part of the community engagement experience, that students really feel like I'm not just completing this project this semester or even this year, but I'm really having to think about how am I packaging this project and passing it on to the next class so that how am I communicating the knowledge I've gained to the next group that comes in and works with this partner? How am I structuring this partnership across courses in such a way that we're building a community that extends beyond just this one semester in terms of how we do this project?
So are you talking about knowledge not only specific to the client, but procedural knowledge as well?
Yeah, both. So how do we make the students sort of the part of not only the learning experience for that one semester, but the sort of teaching and learning experience that extends throughout maybe the life of that partnership, right?
Yeah. Or even, here's what we learned doing this, and even if the partner's different, that learning shouldn't be nice to be able to transfer that.
Yeah.
So do you think that's transferable, or does each group of students need to learn it again?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe there's both, but I'm just wondering, I mean, is that something that you've been thinking about as you've been doing these partnerships? Is that a component of this, that putting the students in the position where they are also responsible for thinking about how they're passing that knowledge on to the next group of students?
Yeah.
Or
That's what I did.
Yeah.
That's what I did first semester, because there's only a few of us that transferred over into that second semester course. It was Gina and I, and over winter we had to work with some design problems to try to format the survey so none of us only looked good and it was actually usable for online purposes. And I worked with Brian, who I have never worked with in my life, via summer to get him on the same page and catch him up and be like, okay, so this is what I've been doing. Like, I knew he was not fully invested yet, but I had to sit there and say, this is what I've invested my time in. And if you're working with the right group of people and the people that actually care, he sat there and said, okay, now Bree's is invested. Now it's my turn to be just as invested as her to execute this project that she worked so hard for in the first semester. So I feel like it's our responsibility to sit there and say, okay, this is what I'm doing, now I need you to pass this on. And that's why it helped me being a junior when I worked with all these seniors, because I could sit there and they knew I cared, so it just worked out that way.
yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. It's Bree, right?
Yeah.
I mean, because I think that element, you point out the investment, right? And I think that the connection between the motive we have for doing the work we do and what we're learning while we're doing it, I think are just so important. And so it's like one thing just to tell people, this is what we did. It's another thing to even communicate, like, this is how we're investing in this project, and like invite people to invest again in it, right? I think that's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, that's true, because you and Gina were the only people that continued. And then there was Brian and Maddie and Jess. Yeah, Joss, yep. So you guys really had to bring them up to speed, and they had to be willing to invest enough to be ready to hit the ground running once, especially since we start a second semester later than a lot of other schools do. But yeah, I mean, you're right. Over Christmas, I would get some material from you, and I'd get some from Brian on redoing the paper survey.
Brian, but we figured it out.
Well, then you and Brian ended up doing a project together in the spring class, which is totally separate from this one. Yeah.
I think it's such an important question, right? I mean, both of you were involved with the task force, and one of the things we talked about there is how do we build a scaffolded model that supports community engagement work throughout the institution. And I think sort of where I think you're heading with this, that students are prepared at different levels to do this work. And one way to do it is sort of take a sort of medical education model,
Yeah.
sort of see what we do with the teacher on it, so that maybe in the first year curriculum, are we giving students opportunities to participate at a sort of lower level of engagement, but then they're doing some of these projects, and then at upper levels they're actually teaching other students how to do this work.
Yeah. So you've been reading the research. What does the research say about this?
Well, I think that there's what we know sort of theoretically, and I think that there's what we don't have a lot of models for that really show how we're connecting this learning sort of vertically and horizontally across the curriculum in a really sustained way through these kinds of partnerships. I think that there's gaps in there.
Yeah.
It's like, I think that as institutions we've done good
Yeah.
at the first year, we do good at the senior level, and there's not necessarily always like a good connection there. Let alone what we see is like these kinds of sustained, like interdisciplinary partnerships across time that aren't again happening just at the freshman or senior level or something. I don't know. I have one more question for you, Bree. I mean, related to this. I mean, do you think that, related to this idea of investment, do you think that as a student you have a different ability to get students invested in a project than, let's say, faculty do? I know that, like, as faculty, we have motivations that we give students to get things done, right?
Yeah.
Like grades and stuff. But do you think that as a student that you have an ability to give like new colleagues coming in a different sort of understanding or a way to invest in a project that maybe I can as like a teacher?
Are you talking like when I talk to other students?
Yeah, like
to
when
get
you
them
have,
on
when you
board?
have these new people coming in on a project, do you feel like you're able to give them something as like a fellow student that maybe I can't as like the teacher or something?
Yeah, because I feel this is just from how we've been raised our whole life. I feel like it's always been the teacher's going to tell you to do something. And I feel like that's how receptive and how we still are nowadays is, oh, they're telling me to do something, and automatically people go, do I really want to do this? And then there you have people like that, when you hear from your peers and you're talking to your peers and someone sees me excited, then they're going to get excited. And I also think that has to do with maturity in upper level classes of being like, okay, this is our project and I care about this project. Because even when you're like, when you come in, you're like, oh, say I came in and I was like, I want to major in graphic design. Yes, I wanted to major in graphic design. Did I exactly know what investment looked like and the time and consideration things had to go into it? No. So as time moved on and as I saw my peers of higher level have the care and the time that they put into their work and what they did, I automatically grasped onto that. So I feel like it's a lot of peer interaction, how we interact with each other. Because once someone cares about something, it's very easy to get everyone on board. I luckily have never been in a CPC project where that was ever a problem because everyone wanted to be there, and I've done 3, so. Did that answer it?
Yeah, nice.
My guess is too that the grades become superfluous because really what's important to you is satisfying that client and doing a good job for that client. It's real, and so.
For some students.
Yeah.
Not for all.
I would say for a large portion.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the rule, not the exception.
Yeah. Yeah, that becomes very much a satisfaction element
Yeah,
of
and
that,
it
is
becomes
doing good work for the client.
Pride,
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
Your own
Oh,
pride.
I
Yeah.
don't think once we thought doing that project, we're like, oh, what are we getting graded on? Like, I don't think that crossed my mind
Right.
once. It was more like, how am I effectively going to do this? Instead of it being like, okay, what's in it for me type of thing. Like, I never thought that once through any of my CPC projects.
Can I pick up on something Brian said? You mentioned sort of an assessment argument there, right? And I think when we're assessing CPC projects, we need to use a different model. And it's actually kind of going back to an older model where we assess student success by could they do what they wanted to do after they graduated. So rather than being an internal assessment within the university, it was, are we giving our students what they need to succeed when they get out? And I think that's where these CPC projects, how they really need to be assessed, is our students who are doing these CPC projects getting the experience, the knowledge, the habits of mind that are going to help them succeed after they graduate. And I hate to see us kind of get into sort of an internal, how do we assess this internally? Because I think that's really what matters. If our students are getting what they need to succeed in the world and be happy, effective citizens, then we've succeeded.
Well, hopefully that's what our program outcomes are all about, right? And
Yep.
so as we have those program outcomes and our more university-wide outcomes, hopefully that's what those outcomes
It's
are
just-
about, is preparing our
It's
students
just harder to
really.
define those outcomes when you don't know what the syllabus is going to be, for the semester.
But those are bigger than, and I
Yes,
think that's what
yes,
you're saying.
yes,
Is
exactly.
the skills that the students bring to the marketplace are, are part of the outcomes that we have as a university for an educated person. So
Yep.
someone who comes out of here with an undergraduate degree should be able to have these
Yep.
particular skills.
Yep.
So those are overarching. So I think the more we can do to, and hopefully those outcomes reflect the skills that students need out in the workplace today. So that would be, that's how I would think about the assessment of that. Is, are our students demonstrating mastery in a lot of those skills that are going to be so valuable to them when they're actually out in the workplace? And I think getting employer feedback and getting feedback from alumni is also really useful, so that they can say, yes, I felt really well prepared. These are the jobs that I did, and this is what I really felt I was able to do a good job.
Yep.
Because a lot of that too, as Al mentioned that phrase habits of mind, it's how do I take on those habits, and then also I think the other piece is taking on the perspective of somebody who's different from me. And how do I do that? And I don't know that you can give somebody an instrument and say, you know, sort of, this is going to date me. Kid, have you rehabilitated yourself? I play Alice's Restaurant almost every other semester because people have not heard it.
That's amazing.
But it's, I don't know, assessing those sorts of, and they're more than just skills. They're approaches to a task and approaches to what needs to be done and how do we go about even thinking about that process.
But I hear you, but I think we already have some assessment built in, right? A partner is making some claim as to
Yeah.
whether or not that's able to be done, right? Whether you've heard them, whether you understand their needs, whether you've been able to sort of translate those into the product that's being delivered. And I think to the degree we move to that sort of multi-tiered model, you know, the ability to sort of deliver on it in a guided experience with, you know, in class is one thing, but then moving to another level where you're not guiding a team of your peers to do the same things. And now I understand it at a much deeper level. So I think
Yes.
there are ways we can, you know, that we can assess those skills and habits here. I think you're right. I don't think it stops at, you know, students cross the stage at commencement. I think we
Yep.
do need to think about, you know, what are they doing a year out, 5 years out, 10 years out, you know, and sort of see what was the impact of that experience. But,
Yep. It's amazing when you mentioned Alice's Restaurant. I played that just the other day. And it was weird saying, Alexa, play Iowa Guthrie.
But she found it.
She did.
Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.